thank you all for being here and getting here as quickly as you could. I know it's difficult for some of you, but I do appreciate you getting here, and maybe if we get you here early, we can get you home early, so that would be a good thing for all of us, I guess. I think I'm going to start out by letting you speak for a couple minutes. The last time we met, everybody got a chance to go around the room, introduce themselves, and interact with everybody, and talk a little bit about what your personal likes, wishes, and concerns were regarding the property. And in doing that, it was great to hear what everybody's thoughts were. It helped us quite a bit in getting a perspective of what your ideas were for the property starting out. That being said, now we've got to act, as I said, we're a team, and we've got to act as a team now to also take into account the other 34,230 people. There's 34,242 people. 62. So subtract your 12 out, and we're back to 50. So we've got to take into account the needs of the other 34,260 people in this community as part of this process. So I want to have your minds stay open, and we'll talk a little bit about other things. We have an agenda tonight that we want to go through. After we get through the items of discussion, if there are any questions anybody has or any comments you want to make, you're more than welcome to do so. We can spend some time doing that. And with that, I think I'd like to just turn it over to Andy for a few minutes, and then we'll get on with business.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Just to kind of reiterate a little bit what Jim said, first of all, thanks everybody for continuing to participate from the town board perspective. As I said 2 weeks ago, I think we've got a really diverse group of individuals here that have a lot of talents that are going to come to the table, and I'm confident that we'll have a good document moving forward. As I said in my last comments when we were talking 2 weeks ago, and Jim just reiterated that, we are representing 34,000 residents in this town, and I just ask that everybody keep that in perspective as we move forward, to just kind of put it in context of what I call, overwhelming support for where we are today. I think somewhere in the range of 6,000 people voted for this referendum vote for something that was, $3.6 million. Think about this, about 1,300 people voted for the Penfield School District, and that was almost about $100 million. So that shows you, that the community supported the town's efforts in purchasing this property, but it also told us that it wasn't just an isolated turnout. One of the reasons why I personally was excited that was that 80-20 margin, because it really showed the entire town's support for this. And so moving forward, I just ask, as ideas come up and people, not even in this group, but at some point we'll have 1 or 2 public information meetings, so we let the community come in and kind of hear from them. Some ideas you may just sit there and shake your head. Other ideas you may sit there and say, that is something we should consider. We have to take all that in as a committee and be fair to everybody. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks that their idea is something that we should consider, and we owe that to the community as members of this committee to sit and listen and let someone orate, what they think potentially should be on the property, and then we will, regroup and start going through all of these things. So I just ask everybody to be fair, be understanding to different ideas as they come forward. So, Jim, I don't know if we just kind of want to go in quickly on general municipal.
Yeah, I think so. I think we sent out everything to you in terms of the resolutions that dealt with the bonding issues, and also the purchase agreement, because we talked about that last month, and we thought it was important for you to have a good feel for what the purchase agreement entailed. It's hard to know what you can and can't do as a group unless you know what was transacted so that we can move forward. And I don't know if you found it interesting or not, but it did for me too, because it was one of the first times I had a chance to actually read through that agreement. One of the comments that came out of it, and I'm going to let Andy expand upon it a little bit in a minute, but the term general municipal use. And there's a reason why we have that term within the resolutions for the bonds. And I'm going to let Andy talk a little bit about that. And there's good rationale for it, and then maybe you can appreciate why we did what we did.
Thanks. Yeah, and before this committee started, as I'm sure all of you know, when this issue back in January and February was really at the high point, You know, the town board heard a lot of ideas. A lot of these ideas you guys will hear throughout the next couple months or throughout the next couple weeks. And so, you know, you had to put a balance into that and what we thought might be a bond resolution that could get community support. And, you know, we had to be careful about that. As town board members, we do represent the entire town of Penfield. We don't have ward systems where we represent certain geographical areas. And so somebody in East Penfield off of Harris Road may have a perspective that's just as valuable as somebody on Clark Road or Huntington Meadow or you know, Harwood Circle. And so you got to do that. You got to get that balance. And we decided that General Municipal was the most flexible, and I think Tony the supervisor, Tony LaFount, was pretty clear in his comments why we went down that road, to give us the flexibility to be here today and to look at different options on that parcel and not be cornered into one particular use only and not really looking at it from a holistic perspective of the entire town. And so General Municipal does give us a heck of a lot more flexibility on what we can do on that property, you know, than, you know, particular designated as just strictly parkland or some other use like that. We can get into the definition of general municipal, but, you know, I just, you know, Tony's comments, I think, said it really well. The greatest flexibility for overall community and public use, such as a combination of open space, passive and active recreation, community center, library, lodge, or other public facilities that could be on that property. And so that was the broadest perspective, the most flexible perspective in order to get something forward forward before the populace of Penfield. And, you know, 80-20 says it all as far as community support to move forward with this in mind. So that I just wanted to give a quick couple-minute overview as what the town board was thinking at that point, hearing a lot of different interests coming at us back in early 2018 when we were deliberating on what the resolution would say, and that's where we're here today.
And to follow up on his comments, somebody at the last meeting asked about the term alienation, so I wanted to spend some time on that just for a couple minutes. We don't have to spend the whole night on it, but alienation, it's an important issue because in the state of New York, if you were to buy land under the premise of parkland, and money is spent in the state or the federal government offers you money to do that, and that has happened in Penfield. We have parks such as Harris Whalen Park where we received state money, other parks within the community that have state money. Those are alienated properties. Those properties, in order to do things on those properties other than for recreation purposes, and even in the case of building a shelter or a community center or a recreation center in those parks where green space is being taken away for the purpose of indoor recreation, say an ice skating rink, that has the potential to actually have to go back to the state of New York for discussion as to whether or not the benefit for the public really exists for that kind of a use to be put on a park. So it becomes very cumbersome because if the community says they want a ice skating rink or they want an indoor lacrosse field, for instance, that potentially, under an alienated situation, would have to go back to the state of New York for a determination as to whether or not there's a benefit to the community at large to allow that to occur. That becomes very cumbersome. It's very time-consuming. It could take over a year, if not 2 years, depending on what the situation is. So that becomes a real issue to the communities at large because it takes so much time to resolve. And sometimes it doesn't get resolved. Sometimes the state says, no, you can't do it. It really, truly is taking away from the value of the property. In this particular case, it does give us a flexibility. This property is not under an issue of alienation because there's been no money given to us for the purpose of purchase or any type of improvement to the property at this point in time. So right now, we have the ability to be as flexible as possible. And, you know, as time goes on, maybe there will be an issue where, you know, we receive money or a grant from the state for one reason or another for some project. That happens, then there is the issue of alienation, and we have to address that at the time that it occurs.
We're general municipal use now. If at some point in the future, does that prevent us from making a park? Say, for instance, when the Quarry's a lake and you might want some access to it from the south side there, could it then be declared as made into parkland?
No, the reason it's, the issue of alienation is the fact that the government, the state or the
No,
federal
I'm not talking
government.
about alienation yet, but can general municipal use property be converted to parkland if deemed appropriate?
Well, you may not want to. You may
No,
want
no,
to
I
keep it
know,
open.
but could you?
You could do anything. I mean, it's gonna be, it's gonna be whatever this group makes a recommendation to the
Yes,
town board.
okay,
The town
but-
board then decides what that's gonna be.
Right.
I mean, this is a recommendation group.
But we're not
If- if-
parkland now, so we don't have to worry about alienation.
No, we do not. But as I say, at some point in the future, if we accept funds for some type of park improvement or recreation improvement that's benefiting the community, and everybody wants it, it then puts the situation into an effect where you may have an alienation issue at that point on, for that property.
Just changes the
But-
dynamics
It
a
does,
little bit.
tremendously.
Just to make sure I understand, so we don't have to worry about alienation, and the only way we would ever have to worry about it is if we had procured state funds for this.
That's right.
Okay.
Or if it had been purchased for the purpose of,
Right,
for parkland.
yeah.
Okay.
If the public's perception was this is gonna be parkland, and the wording within the resolutions for the bonding identified it as parkland or
Okay,
open space,
Yeah.
that would drive the
That would
process.
have narrowed the circumstance right off the bat.
okay.
Which means you might not have had a shelter or several shelters or a community center, or whatever you may want to do or recommend. Some of those recommendations just wouldn't be viable at that point in time because we'd limit ourselves to a point where you just couldn't do it, so.
Okay.
And general municipal use includes buildings like community center, but that was not in the bond proposition that went in front of the voters.
No, but that's the
was it?
reason why it was left as
And,
flexible as possible
And
because.
the moratorium committee didn't think about that.
No, I agree with you. That was not brought up initially. I think that we were so worried about development of the site. We didn't really think about community development as being
There are some of the
Penfield
open
development
space
is-
folks who think community center is development.
Yeah.
True, absolutely. And again, somebody on this committee or several people on this committee may think that. And, as I said at the last meeting, if this committee comes to consensus that that's the case, your recommendation would be not to do that. Again, it just depends on what you feel as a group, and we are a recommendation group. We're not approving anything.
And it doesn't have to be one recommendation.
No, you could have numerous recommendations.
Right.
And a lot of that's going to help you too is, number one, when we walk the site, and we're going to talk about walking the site as a group fairly soon tonight. And then the other part of it is hearing the public and what the public's ideas are. You could get a ton of people in here and they all have different ideas as to what it should be. And as Andy said, you can pick and choose as to what you think is an appropriate idea and what really doesn't have merit at that point in time. A lot of it's being dealt with in terms of funding. How would you pay for something like that? How long would it take? You might have some short-term goals for the property. You might have some long-term goals for the property. Those are the things that we'll get into and start talking about once you get some people giving you some ideas as to what they think the property might be used for. Alex?
You said something in there that I just want to make sure I understood. If we were to take money from a public grant to do an improvement in the park, build, say, a basketball court or something like that, are you saying at that point that we would
Potentially,
be
it
at risk
could
of
be, yeah.
the entire
Or-
property would be?
Well,
at risk?
I'm not quite sure about that, and I don't want to make that statement. Certainly, the area in question where the improvement occurred, that certainly would be subject to an alienation issue, where
Mhm.
you're not going to go tear it back out again, or do something else other than what was approved, unless the state government determines that it's an appropriate situation for us.
We should check with Mr. Horowitz.
We are doing that as we
Yeah.
speak, and at some point in time, I suspect he might come in and give a brief presentation to you about the specifics. I don't think it's time to do that yet. I think we gotta become more acclimated to the property and really know what we can and can't do. But I think at some point in time, he may wanna come in and just talk very briefly about it. Or at least,
That's the town.
at least transfer that information to us so we can convey it to you properly. Yes?
I had a twofold question. First of all, what is the percent of the bond that we have? What percent are we paying? What is the town paying?
Oh,
Do we know?
boy.
No, we are paying, let's see, it was 3.6, we paid $260,000 for
Right.
the Clark House.
Right.
And then,
Ginny, I can find that.
actually, it's here,
Yeah,
it's in the, it was in your resolution.
It's a good rate because
Yeah, it was
Well, I expected
We did have, I think it's
Good
in
time to
the
get the
resolution,
rate.
was it 3.3 something?
It's around there, yes.
Okay,
3.3 something, yeah.
okay, then second, what percent of our tax levy in the town is other than necessary budget items, payroll, maintenance and whatnot? I guess, any bonding? Do you know what percent bonds take
Right
of our
now,
levy?
I.
Any idea? Can
we have
find
a-
out?
We have a couple of bonds going on. Bonds are weird because they come and they go, you pay them
Right.
off, and
Oh, I
then new ones
know
come in
that.
and take their place, so it's kind of a flowing
Right.
process. We don't, the town board hasn't over the years done anything where it got crazy, where you had too much. We've kind of held off on projects till we knew that we got to a
Mm-hmm. Right.
point where
Something's
this one was
gonna retire,
winding
right.
Yeah,
down.
we've got bonds for several different things. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got
Yours.
bonds, we're still paying the bonds back for the open space in 2002. The open space acquisitions, those bonds are still being paid off. We've got bonds for sewer projects, we just did White Village, some areas in there. We've got bonds for, new pump stations. There's lots of different things.
A lot of infrastructure
So I mean,
issues.
we
Okay.
can get that information
I would
from,
love it.
we can get that information
I'd
on
appreciate
what
that.
stuff we have out there.
Those,
Land acquisition is, kind of just one realm of it. There's other stuff for, road infrastructures and
yeah,
general
that'd be,
infrastructure that we
that'd
can
be,
get from bigger
I'd like to know
projects.
that, so, okay.
Yeah, the philosophy's kind of like in your family when you have two or
Yeah,
three
right.
cars and you have one car and it's starting to wind down on the
Yeah.
payments, so you go out and buy another
No,
one
I-
and they
yeah.
kind of replace it. We don't go out and just buy three
Do
cars.
that
at
often,
one time.
huh?
Yes, understood.
We don't go out and just buy three cars here at
Yeah,
one time
right.
and they're all brand new for bonding. It's
Okay,
too
yeah.
expensive and it's a burden to the community. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions about the general municipal law? Or the general municipal?
Should we be thinking about a townwide survey? Putting that together?
I would
I
wait,
talked to my IT people.
well, I would wait on
Survey
that.
of what?
What the residents' interests
Yeah.
are in having us do with Shadow Pines.
I would wait on that because we're still waiting for the results of what the rec master plan is working on. They're doing a community survey right now too. You
Oh,
may see some,
the other group?
Yeah.
the rec
Okay.
master
Oh,
plan
the
group
rec-
Oh,
that
there's
Chris
two different
Viola is a
things.
part of.
Oh, the rec group.
The
So we're
rec-
talking
yeah.
about that today because we're having a little bit of a problem because I think your group is going to move along fairly quickly here in deciding some of the things that you need to decide. One of the things we wanted to provide you was that, those recommendations for the rec master plan, but it's probably not going
Trying
to
to
happen
sync up
until
those
later in the
timelines.
year.
We don't know when that's gonna match
Yeah.
up, but we do know it's gonna happen relatively soon. Chris did mention that he is working on that. They're already collecting the results. They have to analyze them still. So if that information becomes available, we'll push that forward to this committee.
I mean, as a committee, we could take the position that we're representing them, but I really would like to know what since,
Yeah,
That's also what the public information meeting's for too.
right.
We get a lot, usually we get a lot more information, useful information from a public information meeting that we advertise for everyone to be involved with. We can open up public comments through the website too, which we've done before. There's a variety of ways we can do it. Sometimes the survey doesn't always work that well.
Now, why is that?
Because sometimes you don't give everyone the options they want. And then they say, well,
Depends how
I
you
wanted
ask the
this and I
questions.
wanted that.
You
depends
didn't
what
show it.
questions you're asking, yeah.
Yeah, because I could see,
I can't make everyone happy is what it comes down to.
I could see using the public information meetings to generate a list of things for the survey. But I like the idea of a survey because it's data that you can analyze versus anecdotal anecdotes from an information meeting. I mean, they both have value, but I'm just saying that I do like the idea of a survey. And considering how passionate people are about this property, we might get a good turnout on a
I
survey.
agree.
Higher than average response rate.
Yeah.
If you do it though, you've got to design it in such a way that gives them the opportunity to tell you what they want versus just, you've got
Choices.
5 things and all of a sudden they're not on that
A lot
5
of
list.
science to go into a
Yeah.
survey.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna do
It's
it,
easy to
they've
do a
got it
bad
right.
survey
Yes.
that
We can see what Recreation sent out, because I know they're doing a Survey Monkey as well as a write-in
Yeah.
campaign as well. So we
Write-in.
can kind of see what that data comes back at first, and then either springboard off of that, or at least that's a good starting point to go
It
from.
might give us a nice layer for you to react to.
And then also, if you have that data, you can say, look, we, like for people, because you're never gonna make everyone happy, and then you can say, this percentage of people said they would like this, or these top 3 things, and then you have something to fall back on that's that's factual.
Mhm.
So,
The public inputs that I've been involved in have all been like that. I mean, it takes longer to compile the data, but generally you can categorize a lot of the comments into particular bundles, and then there's some that are outliers that you can't necessarily categorize, but usually the reports that I've seen say, okay, well, 60% of the people wanted this, and 30% wanted this, and then you get down into the ones and less than
Yeah.
1%, and the comments are all there for you to read, so you can see just the one-off comments, but I've actually found the public input information to be pretty useful, and definitely way better than anecdotal. It just takes a lot of time to compile, and I'm assuming that
If we
would
do that,
happen.
I don't see why we couldn't do it. I would like to do it after we have our public informational meeting, just to get a
Yeah.
feel for what comes to you first. And I think maybe that public information meeting will spur others to want to respond to you and get a better response than what you would get if we had.
So I assume we'd be having people still write down their ideas in addition
Yep.
to talking and stuff like that, so you
Absolutely.
can take all those written.
And that would give us
comments
an
and
opportunity to
compile
tell
them.
them, to send material to us via email if they don't want to take the survey for one reason or another. We would certainly accept their information via email. Just running back quickly to the purchase agreement. Did everybody get a chance to review it?
I know it came to you late.
It did come to you late, and we apologize for that. We were digging it out, and we had other things we were dealing with, so it took a while for us to get that squared away for you. But one of the things I found was interesting was the fact that there's a 200-foot buffer along the perimeter. I should say the perimeter. There's a 200-foot buffer along the right-of-way of Wayland Road and Clark Road,
Represented on this map.
The left
on
with the exception of existing structures, namely
Clark House and
the
Barn.
Clark House.
So it does allow driveways, it does allow access points through that, but actually it was creating a buffer from the quarry to itself.
Why was that imposed?
That was from Dolomite. That
It was a
one-
requirement
That was
of
one of their
purchase.
conditions.
And it was going to be a requirement for
Only
anybody
they
who
can
purchased.
remove it.
They can't remove it.
They
It-
can't remove it?
There is an excerpt in
We
there,
agreed
basically
to it.
says if and when the quarry
Closes down.
closes and extinguishes, then that would expire.
There's some confusing wording in the purchase agreement on
Definitely some
page 7. Yeah, the
legally-
covenant runs, shall
Yeah.
be binding upon successors and
Right, until the quarry is no longer
Yeah,
viable.
they're making sure we're not running the quarry, we're not mining the
Until-
property, there's not competition from
Right.
us on this property, which obviously isn't gonna happen.
so that's
Well,
what
what-
the buffer's for? I mean, why did they put it in?
They wanted a buffer from the quarry.
Okay.
And they were
For
gonna-
safety? Or-
Yeah, probably concerns about noise and concerns about,
Okay.
impact to, I mean, that was for anybody, so whether it was us or
It wasn't
for-
just us. Anybody who
Anybody that
purchased
bought
the
it,
property was subject to
Obviously,
that requirement.
complaints,
Okay.
issues, concern come as you're closer to the quarry, so they're trying to provide a little buffer to themselves.
So can you do anything in that area, like a
Yes.
sidewalk?
We could do sidewalks, we
Okay.
could do trails. We could pretty much do things that are not structurally oriented. Now, we can't put a shelter in there, for instance. We couldn't build some type of structure that.
Place
you
where
can
a lot
house-
of people would gather, basically.
You can put an entrance and a driveway through it, so you can access, back in there, so it's not, yeah, you're not isolated, you have no access to the roads, you can get through it, you can put pathways through it, but it's just.
Are we to assume that we should not be worrying about any safety issues relating to the quarry? I mean, I think there's a fence. We don't see it from the road.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Isn't there a fence?
we have no business being in the quarry. Nobody does, other
I
than
know,
the
but
people that
if
work
we
at
have
the quarry.
recreation spaces that are owned by the town,
We would certainly-
people migrate across the road.
We would certainly reach out to the quarry and make sure that some fence or perimeter is adequate.
I think there is one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't see it, you don't see it
Right.
from the
Behind
road
the
because of the
trees.
berms.
And with all due respect, teenage boys are going to do what teenage boys do, whether they're on our property or on the quarry property.
Can we safely make the assumption we don't need to worry about that here?
No, because we worry about everything here.
Okay.
But
I
they
would never
also,
say that.
they also have a responsibility as a quarry, as a mining operation, to
And they're very responsible about it.
Secure.
to
Yeah.
secure their facility.
And they have
That's-
people on site.
It's
And
not this
they're-
committee's job to do that,
Right.
that's their job.
that quarry is being monitored constantly. I mean,
I know.
there's surveillance equipment on that quarry. So they know, and it is fenced off, so people should not be on that property unless they're authorized to be there. People are gonna do what they do though, and they always have. It was like the old days at Shadow Lake where people jumped into the quarry.
Right
That's
now
why
there's
it's
no
no longer a quarry.
It's gonna be a tough landing.
It's a hard landing.
Yeah. All right, You wanna go through,
Yeah, let's just keep going.
yeah. So we've talked about a lot of the stuff. One of the things I wanna talk about is, everybody still comfortable with the meeting times and the dates? We're good? Good, great. I think we probably should talk a little bit about, the walk. You want-
Yeah, we looked at kind of two potential dates initially, because I think a lot of people, I'm sure some people have already been exposed to the golf course, have probably walked it and know a lot of it, but we still want to make it available to you. And we looked at two dates initially, one during a weekday, kind of mid to late afternoon, and then a weekend morning. Because we want to get this also scheduled while we still have daylight, while it's not cold and snowy yet. So I think we looked at the 16th, which would be your next meeting, but that night. So instead of a meeting, we could gather the committee and meet at Shadow Pines there and go for a site walk that evening, for that late afternoon, or if people are more available for that Saturday, which is the 20th, I believe. Meet in the morning and go for a walk then, and mainly kind of try to capture the back nine for the most part. Everyone kind of gets an idea of what the front nine is, very flat land. We know the Clark House is there. Still obviously open to walk it, see the changes that have taken place, but then also to see the back nine too. So we have a list that we can pass around that you can put down your availability, since we all have our phones.
How long do you anticipate?
A couple of hours, I would think.
I'd say budget 2.5.
Yeah.
We've slid
And
in.
getting darker earlier now.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty early.
So like when I say a mid-afternoon, ideally that'd be start time between 4 and 5 o'clock if it was on the 16th. If people are available for that, it helps with everybody's schedule, I think, and so we have some daylight to work with.
4:30.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be on that date, but it's a night that you kind of
You've
put
already
aside.
blocked away that time.
So if you could do it, fine. If not, we could look at other dates as well. I'd like to do it fairly soon, though, because we are losing light quickly. And secondly, I want you to be as aware of the property as you possibly can be, because soon we're gonna start listening to people telling you what they'd like to see you do or recommend, and certainly you want to have a feel for what you could and cannot do. Some of the people are gonna tell you they want things and they've never even been on the property. They just drive by it and that's what they think they should do. So it's important that you as a group have a good feeling and understanding of the property, what some of the limitations are to it. We'll be talking about some environmental overlays on the property to give you a better feel about some of the things like steep slopes and wetlands and that kind of thing. So you'll have a better understanding of what can and can't happen there based on your walk of the site.
We going into the buildings?
You could if you'd like, absolutely. Probably should do all that.
Yeah.
Done some drone flyovers as well. So we have a drone now, our PCTV has it, so they've done some flyovers of the site, so as we come back and talk later, when we're talking about a specific area or spot or something else, we've got that data as well. That can actually generate contours. We do have LiDAR data, which is basically flown from airplane, so it gives us 2-foot contours, so as we're talking, especially in the back nine, about some grades, and people have talked about different elements and what they're looking for, we have the ability to kind of pull that data up and look at what the contours are in the steep slope areas, and which may be a betterment for cross-country skiing or slalom or whatever came up, but you have that data to look at as well as.
We're still processing a lot of that imagery though.
We are, but I'm just saying as we get into it, we can bring that information afterwards.
Is there data, or not data, but an indication of how much of cart path there is? Has that been?
We haven't really measured the cart path length, if you will.
Okay.
It's something we could look at though.
It's just maybe as time goes on, if we talk about paths, how do we understand how much is already there versus what we have
Most
to
of it's kind of
connect
tee to fairway, up the fairway, and then it kind
Yeah.
of stops, and then you
Yeah,
get to the
yeah, it's
green,
in
and then it kind of
sections.
picks up at the end. I know on the front nine, we've been mowing links between them.
Is that visible
That
from
map we
Google
just had
Earth?
up through the OpenGIS forms, that kind of already has a rough outline of what the trail is.
The original.
Yeah.
So what, basically this map represents like community input in the mapping community in that world. And people have the ability to kind of make some edits, and we can check them on that, but People provide input, and this map is always continuously updated from the mapping community. Gives you an idea, those red dashes, where most of the paved cart paths are. There's probably some unpaved areas as well.
Yeah, that's
Right.
You
unpaved
could
in
see
there.
on the area.
Clearly, yeah, it's
There's
kinda-
there's mowed space between
Yep.
them.
Can we, all that mulch that's there, so I walk this probably 3 times a week because I
Uh-huh.
walk my dog on it. And all that mulch that's there, can we use that to connect those paved paths? Like,
We gotta be careful. I mean, number one, any paths that we put together now have to be handicap accessible. They have to meet the ADA requirements. Mulch is not a great tool for that, and I've learned that because I've been dealing with other private paths, with helping people develop private paths for seniors. People in wheelchairs are having a very difficult time negotiating these mulch paths. They absorb a lot of water too,
Yeah.
and you know, probably if you're going to do a path, it's either going to be stone dust if you want to don't
Okay.
if you don't want to spend a ton of money on them, or asphalt or cut. You know, generally asphalt.
I was just thinking of it because that's what they use over at Corvus Glen.
I mean, if you were to walk in areas where they're really not handicapped accessible, and there are certainly areas on this property, it might be a good function for that
Yeah.
area. But generally speaking, we've got to be very careful because, again, you got to meet those needs, and the ADA requirements are pretty specific as to what you have to do.
And it's not just wheelchairs, even people that are unsteady,
Yeah.
that want
Yes,
to try to walk for
absolutely.
their health or
Yeah.
whatever, they could go down and trip. or something.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to take into account everything at this point.
But so who's our resource to, like, what constitutes handicap accessibility and what are those guidelines? Like, who in the town of Penfield is?
Well, that's a federal law.
That falls under the law.
Oh,
I'm the town engineer.
okay.
Sorry, I was at the first meeting, Mark Valentine.
4 demerits for that.
What's that?
4 demerits for missing the first meeting.
Okay, so,
But that falls under my department basically, as well as
Facilities.
facilities for our buildings, for our paths. So we have to look at our sidewalks out within the town. We've got to look at handicap ramps. We come up with an ADA transition plan as we look at different pathways that don't meet that. There's areas on the back 9 that are never going to meet that. You know, so it's not going to meet that standard. There is some, like, there's portions of Panorama Trail that don't meet so you can have a running slope of 5%.
okay.
Panorama Trail is steeper than 5%, but there is some variations in the law. Basically says as long as you're meeting the existing grade that's out there, it's still handicap compliant, even though Panorama's running at an 8% slope. Obviously, I can't have a 5% walk on an 8% road. So there is some variances in that. But this is something we'll have to go through and walk. We walk all our town sidewalks, we work with DPW to, mill off lips in areas that we have, put, the truncated domes at, crosswalk areas. We work with the state and the county to, strike new crosswalks, put ped indicators up. So that's something that I can provide information to the group as we get into that further and what the regulations are.
Yeah, because so you said some areas will never meet those.
Yeah, the grade is too steep for
And so
true handicap accessibility.
In that
and
case, if we do any, I'll just say, dirt paths, single track kind of a path at some point, you don't have to keep those.
No, and we would have certain areas that are designated handicap accessibility. If we put up a new building, if you put up something else that, you wanted to get to, if we built a community center, obviously everything to get to the community center or to get to the shelter would have to be ADA compliant.
Okay.
If it's a path that goes down a hillside, or if there's biking paths or whatever else is out there, those things, don't have to. So there is some exceptions to that, but any new building has to be accessible, bathrooms have to be accessible, the route to and from it have to be accessible.
Okay.
So
Is
that's
the public going to be allowed to access those piles and help themselves?
to the mulch.
Yeah,
what is the
DPW's
plan?
overseeing it, I don't think so.
I would
Not
think
right
they
now.
would keep it over here. We've got
Think
a,
they'd move it?
yeah, just to, right now, just so we don't have too many spots of people accessing it, I'll verify with them.
Yeah.
Typically, we use the Columbus crossing that's here. Usually, they grind it in the back of the DPW's facility, and then they just dump it as needed.
They also sell it too.
Oh,
DPW may have a plan for that.
We actually have a contract with a company that will pay the town for the mulch. They burn it and use it as a fuel source. So if there's excess that, we don't use, actually that's an income for the town as well.
There's still additional cleanup happening on the south and,
Oh, absolutely,
right,
yeah.
so that will go on
Yeah.
for,
Yeah, we've got to go on and cut several trees. There are a lot of dead trees on that property, a lot of dangerous trees. We did hear from some people who were concerned about the large trees that were taken down in front of the
Yeah.
Clark
Yeah.
house. But if you actually saw what they looked like,
Yeah.
they're empty in the
they
middle.
were ready to
I was
fall.
shocked when I was
Yeah.
upset, and then I looked and I
Pencil
was
shavings.
shocked.
Yeah,
was like,
it was
"Oh."
truly amazing because, you don't want to see a 150-year-old tree
Yeah.
taken down, but when you
Yeah.
see the danger that it can present to the public and to the property. And it's true now on the south side, we've got a lot of trees we've got to take down, they're dangerous. And we've had some tragedies in the town of Penfield over the years with trees falling, so, we're very conscious of that, and really, people should not be on the southern portion of the property or the back nine until we get that taken care of.
Is there a plan to replace a number of the trees that were taken down?
Well, I think what's going to happen is eventually we have a landscape architect consultant that we work with on a regular basis. They're on contract with us. We're probably going to go in once recommendations are made. I mean, if somebody comes in with recommendations and we start putting trees in before the recommendations come along, and you're planting trees in places where you might not want them, if there's going to be a trail or something, then all of a sudden you've thrown a tree in its path. That doesn't do any good for anybody. But eventually, yes, once we get all the recommendations in, and once we know what we're going to do with the property, both short-term and long-term, I suspect we'll probably be looking at a tree planting program for the property to embellish it any way we can.
So can I ask a budgeting question? I assume that right now the town of Penfield is working on the 2019 budget if it's not already in play. And my question is, I know that this property just kind of came out of the woodwork and there wasn't really a plan in place for it, but I think that the town's done a pretty good job of getting the cleanup done that needed to be done for the short term. What is budgeted right now without a plan in place for 2019 in terms of the maintenance and construction that might occur on that property?
It's all within the different departments' budgets. Like, for instance, Highway Department, they've put in dollars for what is perceived to be what needs to be done for maintenance on that property. There's no specific, like, Shadow Pines page in the budget. It's all kind of spread out within the different departments. But, quite honestly, it's really with the Public Works Department that would oversee that with town forces.
It's a good question, though,
Yeah.
because really, you're right. I mean, it kind of came up after our 2018 budget had been put in place. So we had to kind of scramble a little bit and work around that, which I think worked out pretty well, actually, to get the trees down, get them cleaned up, clean up portions of the building to make sure it's safe. And, there was junk growing in the gutters and that kind of thing. We had everything cleaned up. So, and more needs to be done, but you're right. I mean, for instance, in Mark's division, things need to be done in terms of mapping or in terms of engineering design for the property. There'll be money in his budget for that purpose, but the DPW is really carrying the brunt of it in terms of maintenance and, tree removal and
Right.
all that business.
Any progress on the RFP for the Clark House?
Yeah, I talked to Tony the other day about it, recognizing it probably would come up here. They are moving along on it. We're supposed to have a draft RFP by the end of the month for review by the town board.
How does that get communicated to the business community?
Oh, it'll be, once the final product is completed and the board's comfortable with it, they will send that out via email. There'll be copies sent out through our town clerk's office. It'll be in the papers. I mean, it'll probably be on TV, it'll be on the news.
Anybody who has an interest?
Anybody who has an
A
interest.
chance of seeing it? Yeah.
And there will be criteria. I mean, there are certain people that will just not qualify just because they won't have a commitment to maintaining the property or the building. Some of the uses, again, we talked about, Tony was here last time, talked about the fact that whatever use goes in there really has to be consistent and compliant with the neighborhood, and you're not going to put a nuclear power plant there. You're not going to put the Rolling Stones coming in on Sunday nights, that kind of thing. It's going to have to be something that's really.
Darn.
Not if you live next door to it. I know a couple people that live down there.
I don't know the
probably wouldn't like it.
neighborhood.
But it'll be something that is compatible with and in scale to the neighborhood and functioning with the park. It's compliant or complementary to the property and whatever comes out of that.
Is it on the historic house registry?
It is.
So-
Yeah, that was designated as a
Locally, I
landmark.
don't think it's state or national.
It's not, it's a local landmark,
Okay.
but it still has the status of a landmark structure.
So any business that comes in would have to meet all the guidelines set forth by the town?
Exactly. So that whoever comes in would have to come to the town board for a special permit to operate out of an historic structure.
And there's a little cemetery there, is that different, or is that just local also?
That actually is owned by the town of Penfield. It was a separate property from the golf course and the Clark House property, although
It's called the Pioneer.
it's a Pioneer Cemetery.
Yeah.
And I'm not so certain that it was associated strictly with the Clark House. There were others there that were buried in that cemetery, but didn't necessarily live on that property or near it.
So that has to be cordoned off and
Yes,
fenced around.
that will
Yeah.
always be a cemetery, and we will always be maintaining it.
Yeah.
We
Right
have,
now, it's in a buffer.
we own 2 cemeteries in town. We own that one and the one on the Smith Road Cemetery.
Right, but we should probably protect it from
I know. it's
foot
a
traffic,
joke.
dogs,
Yeah.
stuff.
So
Yeah,
the map
actually,
over here
that's all
shows it
maintained
not being
too.
part of the buffer. There's a little cutout. in the
That's
buffer.
because we own it currently,
Okay.
so they were showing a buffer just on the property that they
Gotcha.
own.
So that's not
But it's
part of this
still
committee,
We've
that's already
always
owned by
that
the town.
property.
It is already owned, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's been, we've been maintaining that for many, many years.
That's something I was wondering about, what would happen to that
No,
when
it's-
we bought this, or
We're
if somebody else bought it.
obligated to, and we will continue to maintain that cemetery probably in perpetuity, as we're required to do under cemetery law. There is cemetery laws, and they have to be maintained once you create one. So we have 2 in town, and we consistently maintain both of them. It is a good question about the Clark House. We will, and eventually, once we get to a point where I think the town board's comfortable with the final product for the RFP, I'm certain they will share that with everybody, and certainly you'll have access to that as well. We'll make sure you have that when the time comes. It'll be interesting to see what comes in and how many people are interested in doing something.
And Bob, we'll get that out to the local restaurant association and, through
Yeah.
other different.
My neighbor across the
avenues.
street has friends who wanted to do a wedding business there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're aware that it's coming.
Yep.
Well, when we do our tour, you'll find some interesting things on the property. For
Yeah.
instance, we will take you through the Clark House. We'll take you through the barn, the big barn that's across the street from the Clark House, which is on the same property. We'll take you down to the work shed that they have down the hill, down the street a little bit further to the east. So it'll give you a better perspective of maybe what we can and can't do with the barns and the structures at hand. So some of them need a lot of work.
Is there anything
It'll be
unusual
interesting to
about
see
the
how
cart,
much money.
the cart barn behind the Clark House? Is there anything?
The old
unusual
cart
there?
house?
Yeah, where the golf carts were.
That's actually in very good shape. It needs a little work, but it's in pretty good shape. You've been through it.
Does it have high voltage system in there or what? They charged all the carts in there.
I don't know what they have. I'm sure Jim Parkman, our facilities manager, would have a good handle on that.
So what, the 2 buildings that are in this image here, the Clark House is the lower one?
That's the Clark House.
Southern one. What's the other one?
That was built after the golf course was in operation. It was a place to store golf carts.
Okay.
And that's why he's referring to the
about.
charging
Got it.
process, because they had to
They
charge
had
them.
electric carts, so they were all charged in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it has to have high voltage in there.
Yeah.
If you're
And
charging
then-
5, 10 carts, 20 carts at a time, it's gotta have a lot of
They
voltage going on there.
must have a good supply in there.
Yeah.
Lots of copper.
Could you, then the other buildings, there's the barn?
Yeah,
Okay.
That was used as part
the
of
barn is
driving range.
gigantic inside. I'll tell you though, it looks like Swiss cheese. When the sun shines in, actually, I have pictures of it. We should probably put those up for you, but we'll
Some
have.
more daylight through the walls and windows.
You'll see it yourself. So it'll be-
Oh, really?
And the maintenance.
It needs
There's
a
those
lot.
It needs a lot of work.
And that's gonna be a
Okay.
question as to whether or not it can be saved or should be saved, because it
The
needs
maintenance
so
shop
much.
was built in the 90s. That's not in bad shape. It's
Yeah,
got
that's not-
concrete
Oh,
floors.
really? Okay.
There is some stuff we've already stored in that building. The Penfield players have some stuff in there, and some other stuff is just stored in there temporarily.
Is there a workshop?
It's empty. I mean, it's
Oh,
just
empty.
busy bay doors with, areas they could pull trucks in, store them at night, mowers, that type of stuff. They could do some general maintenance in the little yard behind it.
They had a small
the-
office in there when they were running it.
There is a little space on the one end that's in there, but it's just pretty much just a shell of it. The other building that was used as part of the driving range, that's in pretty rough shape. It's just an old barn. High ceilings, it's nice old wood, but not a lot's been done to it over the years. And
When was it built?
It's a good question, we don't know. It's quite old though. When you see it, when you get a chance to walk through
You're
it.
saying that might not be attractive to whoever's operating the Clark House.
No, I'm looking at it more of a safety concern, either, part of looking at it is, it's gonna be some significant
well
rehab
shot.
to
The
bring
floor's
it
in
back to
horrible
it.
shape. It's not safe.
There's kind of a partial walk-in cellar underneath it. The floor's in very rough shape, the walls and ceiling are in very rough shape, so it's more of a safety issue, something we'll have to look at, going forward
Now,
as
is
well.
that historic site also?
No, that
part of it?
portion of the property did not fall into the
So
historic
that-
preservation. Act.
If the decision is to tear it down, I mean, my wife would be heartbroken if she hears, because she thinks it's a part of the historic.
No, it actually wasn't. 6 acres were approved for that area. It's on the north side of the
If it's
property.
unsafe, it might have to go, right?
Yeah, and you'll get a chance to see it, and, you may even want to make a recommendation on that structure when the time comes.
I know that the people that you mentioned that are interested in the event planning, they're interested in that barn for barn weddings.
Well, again, I mean, and it may be a good use of the
Yeah.
property. A lot of work would have to be done on that barn to make it safe and habitable. But again, the board is going to have to look at what is compatible with and complementary to the neighborhood. There are people living in that neighborhood. People who have weddings have music, and they have weddings till 11 o'clock at night. You might have a bunch of people in that neighborhood who might not be real excited about that.
It's one to make the building safe, it's going to be a whole other thing to make it compliant to today's, having emergency egress
Building
and lights
codes.
and current building, once you put people inside of it, now you gotta look at, do you have to sprinkler it?
We did put bathrooms in there for
You gotta
sure.
put it takes it to a whole nother level, so that's something to weigh into. One, just making it safe as a barn, and then a public space is, gets into fire code.
ADA compliance.
I know the story, in the Wall Street Journal the other day, that bond weddings are booming in the country. They're up to like 15%
Yeah,
of weddings.
it's become quite a trend.
So
Yeah.
preserving the bond would make the Clark House seem to make a lot more attractive
Yep,
to an investor.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look at that barn, and it might, for the money you'd have to put into it, you might never get it back out again, depending on the type of use you put in
I
there.
don't think it'd be worth putting the money into it based on what you just said, as far as bringing it up to compliance, bringing it up to ADA, safety, egress, all that stuff. Bathrooms you'd have to put in there, so you'd have to run plumbing. I don't think anybody'd be willing to put that money into that.
It's a
to make it
lot,
event.
it's a lot to put
building.
into a property.
It'd be better to start over somewhere else than to do that, I think.
And that would be up to the tenant
Yeah.
to make it all
I
compliant
don't believe
and
that's
redo
part
it
of the
all.
RFP currently, I think the RFP is just for
No,
the Clark
that
House.
property, right now, I don't think we're looking at that as part of the RFP for the
Yeah,
Clark
that's
House.
good bones.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
the,
it's a
pri- it's the
good
Clark
point.
House.
But if somebody wanted to
Switch
use-
keys when you're doing something.
If somebody
would
came to
be-
the town board and said, I'd like to look at the opportunity to do that, and that's gonna be part of the RFP, you're gonna have to spend money on the Clark House to
Right.
bring it, maintain it and
Right.
bring it back to something where it's,
So
you know,
likewise with that old.
it's preserved properly, so.
It says 1960, what does that represent? Is that
That's
when
the
it was built?
address.
That's
Oh, that's the address. It just seemed to be like that, could be that time.
No, that's just the
Subtract 100, you might.
Yeah.
If it's 1860, it's even better.
I'm kind of excited to have you walk through it and see it. I hope it's a nice sunny day when you do it, because it's gonna give you a
Speaking
real
of-
perspective.
Hopefully
of
it's not raining.
Is there a
If
chance?
it's raining, we won't take you.
Is there a chance we can do a walkthrough maybe earlier even in the day, like 10 o'clock instead of 4?
So we had Saturday on that
Well,
list too.
Saturday's hard for me, but during the week, if, I wonder if there's because on Thursday, or on the Tuesday that we meet, I also have a meeting somewhere else, but it's at 4 o'clock. And I go right from that meeting to this meeting, and I can't miss the other meeting to go for a walk in the park.
Does anyone else want
I won't be here for that meeting at all anyway, next week, the next meeting I've got another commitment, but,
Okay.
so that day is out for me.
Okay, I
Well,
understand.
has the sheet gone around yet?
Yeah, I have it right here.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say, if
there
you
an
wanna propose
overwhelming-
an
So,
alternative.
so if we do on both days,
to make it available?
if we do it on both days, we'll certainly have you be able to go into the buildings on both days. We don't want to prevent you from being able to see everything with either one, so. If you miss one, you can get the other, I would hope.
Is there anyone there who couldn't get to
I can't get to either of those.
He couldn't, and
Is there anyone else?
Bob, you got it okay in there, so you're good. No,
I'm just, I'm a golfer, I know the course.
Yeah.
I would like to see the buildings.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, we can always come up with a third date.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, it's important that all the committee members get through it.
I agree.
So if
You
we-
should all see
We
it.
can come up with a third date.
Yeah, I can come earlier that day, I just can't be there at 4.
Yes.
For those that responded to that, I'm just hashing it out now. For those that responded to Tuesday, is a morning time available to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I see a
Uh,
no, I see yeses, I see, did you reply to the Saturday one though? Or could you do Saturday?
Saturday wouldn't work, no, that, after.
So
I'm
Tuesday
working
was your day.
education, 4 o'clock's perfect.
Let's look at a third
We'll
date.
look for a third
Let's
date.
just look at a third date.
Let's
not
try and get everybody through the thing, go
overthink it.
through, and as we get those, as we're doing that, we'll pick up a third date, so that you know fairly soon, if it's okay for you to do it.
And
it
if
isn't,
something comes up on these 2 days where suddenly you can't make it, we'll make a
We'll have a
third day
catch-all
available.
date for you
Well,
if you can't
or
make
the
it.
weather's horrible and it's pouring outside.
Yeah.
It's
We're
one
not
thing to look
taking
at
out
the
those
building,
days,
it's another
definite
thing to
then?
walk.
Yeah, or were we selecting one of, I'm sorry.
I think we're selecting both of them.
Yeah.
I think we were trying to see if there was a better day for everybody. If
That's
not,
what I-
we'll split and
Okay.
we'll do both. So staff will be available. Why don't we say we'll meet at the Clark House, there's parking there. So we'll meet at the Clark House
At
at
4 o'clock?
4 o'clock, 2 Tuesdays from now. For those that can do that, we can look at the buildings quickly and then start kind of walking the back line. And then
get you
Saturday,
the bar, too.
again, we'll meet at the Clark House, 9 AM right there, and then do the same thing. So you don't have to go to both. You
So
can go
there's
to both.
electricity in the Clark House, so
Yes.
you might want to start outside, then go inside.
True. We can come back and then do it during daylight.
Yeah.
Hold all the balls.
Jim, what's the status of the asbestos removal in the building?
Everything's functional in the building.
No, there's
Asbestos.
Oh, the asbestos, I don't know,
we haven't
We
done any
didn't-
asbestos abatement as of yet. The asbestos that's found is minimal. It's in the canopy on the outside of the building, what was on the porch area, as well as in some of the glazing around the windows.
yeah.
So it's kind of, depends on what the use is. If it's totally rehab, then you remove the windows and take it out. If the building stayed as it was, it's not friable, so there's no areas that they found that it was, in ceiling tiles and other spots like that. So there's kind of, if you can, don't touch
Encapsulated
it.
or whatever.
There is some lead in the building, again, in the stain and stuff. In the stain, there's lead. So again, it's a balance between, if you touch it, you gotta deal with it and mitigate it if you leave it alone. So that's gonna be something else as part of, whoever takes it over in the RFP, if they're doing any sort of renovations, updates, what the use of it is, that'll weigh into that.
Was the water checked?
I believe they did check the water on it as well. I'll go back to the
Yeah.
report, but we
I didn't think I
did,
saw that in there.
we did samples around the site for pesticides. There was concerns about pesticides from spraying fertilizers on the site. All of it came back that it was below residential standards. Basically meaning there's different levels that they have for pesticides. It could not be an organic farm, is about the only thing that it eliminated out. So there was some level of pesticides in it. They tested down to that, is it's gonna be organic farm, and then there's a residential level, your backyard, your house. People could live there. Everything we found is below that level. Then from there up it goes, it could be a commercial use, it could be an industrial use. So there's different levels of that, but everything that was found, we tested, I think 4 or 5 tees and greens, figuring the greens are gonna be the most fertilized, sprayed, as well as the fairways. And like I said, we did the lead and asbestos check on all the buildings.
Yeah, everything was in pretty good shape.
It came back better than I
Yeah.
thought with the asbestos piece.
And before we get too far away from the scheduling, so that walk will replace our meeting that evening?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you
Okay.
want it
So
to
in
be-
lieu of that,
And then after the walk, I think we should seriously consider setting up the public informational meeting. Once you've had a feel for the property, then you can, discuss the matter with people as they come in and give comments to you as to what they'd like to do.
When do you anticipate that the back nine would be open to the public?
Not for a while yet. There's a lot to do on that, and I'm thinking probably not till towards the end of the year at earliest.
Yeah, that's been the message we've
Yeah.
had, is
Yeah, it's
maybe
gonna take a while.
mid-December.
DPW kind of interrupted their normal paving stuff that we do, obviously our own roads, oil and stone and paving in our own roads, as well as, assisting the county and the school district. So they, do projects for them as well, so they kind of stopped, did the front 9, and now they kind of jump back
The
into
later the snow comes.
paving and everything else to get into
Yeah.
those. So
Sorry.
now they're gonna
Sorry.
swing back to drainage projects and starting in the back 9, so they kind of had to interrupt what they already had scheduled for this year and normal, summer projects to get into some of that.
Not to delay the public input too long, but does it make sense to wait until after that's open to the public? To get
No,
people's
because
input?
we don't know when that's gonna actually happen. If we get a snowstorm or two, it's gonna drag out into
Yeah.
springtime now.
It's April.
So I think it's important for you to get out there and get a feel for it. And I think it's important for the public to be able to come in and provide some input to you. And then you can start disseminating what you think is appropriate, what isn't. And then the other portion of that is to get that master plan recommendation, that survey work done so that you can see that. And then if you want to conduct a survey, we'll give you the opportunity to do that. Remember, we've got to get this done by the end of March. So we've got a lot to do yet, but I think it can happen. I mean, I have full confidence it can happen.
Jim, I want to just jump off of your point about getting that rec master plan back. Some of the stuff I think we is working with the town board also have to provide to the committee is needs of the town itself. Our community is still growing. We've kind of reached our capacity with the community center right now. I don't want to speak for them, but they have planning needs, and they use the YMCA facilities, they use the school facilities. So I think it's something we as a town should gather and provide to the committee. What is the needs of the sewer department, the highway department, the recreation department? Where do they see what do they need to grow? What other stuff? As their programs continue, as the town continues to develop, obviously we need to serve more and more residents. And right now, if you've been to the community center, you've got the library, you've got the courts in the backside, you've got the senior center, you've got recreation. They're quite cramped in their stuff, and I'm expecting that rec master plan to come back and say their long-term vision is X, Y, Z of something else. Where do the seniors want to be? What are some of the needs of the community? We always have a need for new lodges. We have 2 right now. Those are pretty much, if you've ever tried to book one, they're pretty much booked every weekend from spring till fall. May not be just here. We've looked at Rothfuss Park and other things. So I think we owe you that. We'll work with the town board is what other stuff do we see from the staff side, from our end of as the town continues to grow, how do we serve the needs of the community? How do we provide the residents with the level of service we have as we grow?
Can I address that for 1 quick second? So the discussion about the community center, it's intriguing to me a little bit because I know that there is, and I've sort of heard this be discussed, and I think Tony may have mentioned it in his supervisor's column, that there's a possibility that we may need a new community center. It's my understanding, and I may have this wrong, but it's my understanding that originally Rothfuss Park was slated, or a portion of that was slated for a community center.
There was a plan initially that showed the possibility of having a second community center or a community center on that property early on. And that may still be the case, I don't know. It's going to come out in this master plan as to what their recommendation is going to be. It may be there, it may be somewhere else, we don't know. But that's why it's important for you to have that information.
Just part of the conversation for this
Sure.
group to have is.
Yes, there was a plan at one
where
time
does it
that showed
go?
that when we
Obviously,
first
that's not
built
been
Rothfuss
built
Park.
over there, for whatever reason, but, that's something else to look at, and obviously, that would be possibly another bond. I mean, that would be well above and beyond this committee, is, how that lays out, and, if you do master planning of the area, we're kind of just looking at what ideas of what make sense. I mean, we've got 212 acres, there's a lot of space and a lot of opportunity there. What might make sense to go over there, to have what's in the area. It is the kind of the heart of Penfield, right in the middle. So if you're looking to put something central, does it make sense for a community center to go over there? Does it make sense for some other facility to kind of be in that middle area that it serves the greater good in that whole region?
When is that rec master plan expected to come out?
They're working on it now. They were doing their survey, so I'm expecting once that survey comes back, that may kind of be the impetus to them to kind of wrap that up. They started a little earlier than we have. Unfortunately, we're hoping they get it done sooner than later, because I think that dovetails into what you guys are doing quite a bit.
Has there been a demonstrated need for additional community center space?
From our rec department, yes. They said they cannot accommodate all the people that want to meet our rec needs. They currently try to utilize space at the high school. They partner with the YMCA just because we don't really have one small gym space.
Rec club
but
takes some of the programming.
They're turning people away in the summertime that they just don't have enough space to accommodate all the needs. The seniors are, looking for their own space and having a spot. So just seeing the demands of the community we already have, we don't have enough. So as this town continues to grow and
The big problem with the community center,
What's
it looks
the-
like it's a spacious area and this beautiful green space. The problem is, we own the building, we own the parking lot.
That's it.
We don't own any of the green space around it, it's still owned by the school district,
Is
so.
that right?
So,
that's
you
our
can
role.
see you can see the box around that,
Yeah.
so it really, it's deceiving because it's really limiting as to what you can and can't do there.
Do we have any benchmarking from other communities our size and what kind of facilities that they provide? Like other communities that are demographically like ours and,
Probably a question for Chris when he's
Yeah, and
available
I think
this
our rec
meeting.
director can provide that. I know he's talked about, I think Ontario just built Casey Park. It's out there, and I haven't been to the facility. It has kind of an indoor facility area, has a spot for the seniors. It has an indoor area that
It's
you could
beautiful.
have basketball
I've been
courts
out
and
there,
stuff
it's beautiful,
indoors.
yeah.
It has like a turf covered area, so he just kind of,
what,
put that up.
what is this?
It's in Ontario, Casey Park.
Plus, the new Quonset Hut
Oh,
building,
okay.
they have the Quonset Hut building.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
They've got
beautiful in
stuff
there,
in there
actually.
Huh.
that provides more interior space that, obviously you can have 365, use of fields, courts,
Indoor
other areas,
walking,
but
that kind
But
of.
that's something I think that, Chris can provide at the next meeting and
What
provide it.
what is Penfield's rate of growth? What are we,
Pardon?
our rate of growth? You said we're a growing community,
The last few years, we've been actually leading Monroe County in the number of new homes. We're about 170 plus or minus new homes a year.
Okay.
We've been averaging, it was Webster, I don't know if last year we were leading, but the couple years before that, we kind of had the most new growth of homes in it. Obviously, Doug, if you zoom out on the map, we're one of the most, let's say, undeveloped towns going east.
Yeah.
Of any other area. If obviously you go south into Perrington and you see the village of Fairport, how much density and development they have. A lot of ours is limited by sanitary sewers. So we don't have a lot of sewer east of 250, so that's kind of what's limited what we have out there so far. That's why it's 1 acre, 2 acre. If that area was ever to get sanitary sewer, obviously there'd be much more of a demand for housing and development. So most of our development's kind of West Penfield, and then you cross kind of the 250. We still have pockets of area that are still undeveloped west of 250, but there is potential, probably not in my lifetime, but just as we move out, that obviously will continue to grow.
I have a question. Do we have a breakdown of population by age in the
We
town?
do, actually. we
Because
do.
I would love to know, like, seniors, middle, kids.
A good
all that.
document, that's a great question, and it leads to, right now, the Comprehensive Plan Update Committee's working, and they're in the process of looking at the existing data that we have in the 2010 Comprehensive Plan. It's a good document to read. If you're not familiar with it, you should really read it. It's online. Penfield is one of the fastest growing populations in the Monroe
We have that in our
County.
documents, but we can put that on your Google Docs page
Okay.
if you want that.
It says of 2016, the latest.
Yeah, 2016, with a
How
grain
do
of
they
salt,
get
it's
it?
the American Community Survey,
Census data.
census data.
Okay. Oh.
So the 2010, these 10 years ones are the decennial census. It's sent to every
Right.
household. The American Community Survey is sent to, I think it was sent to
That's
4,000 households, give or take, in Penfield. So it's not the entire town, but it's supposed to give an idea of
Sample.
the general sample of Penfield, and to be able to extrapolate some data about that in between the decennial census. But
Yeah, I'd love
these
to
are,
hear that.
We can add that to the Google Docs.
Please.
And then as you can see, the data shows here, as well as Monroe County, we are an aging community.
Yeah.
And that's some of the stuff we've been talking about with a comprehensive plan, as well as other areas we're looking into is housing for seniors and other stuff within the community is one of the things we've identified in the 2010 comp plan that this community is lacking. A lot of people may want to move out of their 4-bedroom, 1 acre home, but also still want to remain in Penfield. And that's one of the areas that we identified in 2010. We've had some developments from then. senior targeted, but I think in 2020, that's something that committee's looking at again, is that that's a continued need.
Okay, now, and secondly, for school age, would we have to procure that information from the school district as opposed to you guys? You know, like what the new, how many kids are starting in the kindergartens and all that?
I'm sure we could get that. I'm sure we're gonna get that as part of the comprehensive plan update, as to what the enrollment will be for, each level.
Whenever we
Probably
get
on the
that.
Penfield schools
We
budget.
can reach out to them, but I'm sure they've got
I don't know
projections
that it
themselves.
is.
for-
It should be. I know when I worked for the schools, that was in our budget documents, because they had to use those numbers to create the budget.
I know there was a huge concern also with, when the homes were part of the idea of the land, is that the school already is,
Bulging.
busting at
Yeah.
the seams, and so if we're the fastest growing town in Monroe County, that, I mean, I feel like we're dovetailing.
It's kind of a misnomer though, because you're the fastest growing town one year,
Capital project.
because a housing development came in and started churning out.
Sure.
You might not be the fastest growing community the next year because it's been built out or it's halfway done and somebody else is now starting 2 projects in another
So
town.
if we're looking at
And the housing may be
projections,
senior
potential
housing.
projections
Town
for,
community homes.
so we can make appropriate suggestions for recommendation of land use, does the town have an idea of what our desired growth would be over the next 10, 20 years? I mean,
We are a town of planned progress.
Well, the desired growth over the next 20 years would be to have younger people come in,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
sure.
But there is a need for senior housing right now, and a lot of the housing that's being built is senior housing. It's for
Yeah, no,
seniors.
I'm not,
Yeah.
Yeah,
But there's,
For
but
that,
what's
that's
happening
fine.
now is the millennials are having children,
yeah.
are having a lot of children. And there's going to be a need to address that concern as time goes on here.
We need to address that.
So like,
They're having children, which is great.
so the town-owned property off Baird Road is the old Baird Road School.
That's right.
So they took the Baird Road School and made it into the various whatnots. And so I'm assuming that that building itself could be put back into the educational system and made back into a school.
Nope. It would never, the school would never put the amount of money needed to come up to the state guidelines for that
It
school.
would be cheaper to build a new
They
school.
would tear it down and start from
They
scratch.
were built
Yeah.
in 1955,
Yeah.
54 and 55.
Yeah.
They're really,
I went to kindergarten, first grade there.
I've seen
That was-
inside the walls of those buildings, it's,
Yeah, that's the
It's
sister
interesting.
school for the Brown Crop
Yeah.
Community Church. That
Right.
was the same.
Yeah,
Yup,
the
exactly
Atlantic
same
Road
building,
School.
yeah.
That's right.
It used to be, it's long different
Right.
now.
Yeah.
But as you know, there's a lot of criteria now in the state education law that requires them to do things
Okay.
that you could never get away with.
Okay.
They would have to tear
Oh,
it to the
there's-
ground and start from
Okay.
scratch. And they wouldn't do that, they would do it in their own property.
The school district's been acquiring property. I mean, they own property out onto Harris Road.
Yeah.
They know they're gonna eventually have to build another school.
They're projecting, their growth and continuing further east, so they've got property on Atlantic Avenue, they've got property on Harris Road.
Off of Penfield Road,
Off of Penfield Road, they've been
Watson Harbor.
judiciously buying property going east, knowing that, it's gonna continue to grow at some point.
So they don't need shadow pines for buses then?
You have to ask them that, but.
They need something for buses.
So where are the people coming from? Because Monroe County is declining.
Well, you're getting a lot of young people that are coming in from the city,
From
who
the
owned a
city.
house in the city and now want to upgrade.
Okay.
Yeah, we found in 2010 that when, what happens is, unless you grew up here like Andy did and others, when you hit about the 32 or 33 age bracket, you now have become married. You now have a child, a young child who's getting ready to go to school, and they want them to go to a good school system. They want good recreation programs. So now you've come to Penfield because you've got a young family. That young family, luckily for us, stays here, and they become seniors, and they don't want to leave because they've been here for 30, 40 years, 50 years, and now there's no place for them, and they do want to stay, but now they're moving to other communities because we're not providing, we have not yet provided enough senior housing to accommodate them.
But isn't there a senior housing development going up over next to the Y?
It's currently being
under
reviewed.
proposal right now.
But for the last several years, like going back to 2010, when we first started looking at the data, saying we were underserved at that point in time, that was 8 years ago. There were a lot of people that weren't seniors 8 years ago that were going to be seniors later on, and they are now.
But it takes time. I mean, from the 2010 comprehensive plan recommended mixed use. I mean, it's taken us how many years to get that together, and then just in 2017, the town board approved the mixed-use district. Now we're just starting to see the first projects come to fruition from that. So from the 2010 comp plan came out the recommendation, staff worked on pulling it together, had another mixed-use committee, pulled that together, so you can see it, you know, it takes time to project ahead. So, you know, even as we're seeing senior stuff now, we're trying to catch up to that, and some of the stuff we've talked about, you know, is having a focus group or whatever of potential developers, bankers, other, you know, what realtors, what do they see as the future? What's the demand that, you know, they're starting to see in the market? Because obviously by the time we put it in a plan, develop a code for it, you know, we're 8 to 10 years behind. So we kind of try to get a forecast what's coming up and
Plenty of dental offices.
plan accordingly.
Everybody in Penfield.
It's amazing.
Great
Dental drama.
There's another one.
The dental
on Penfield Road
capital
by
of the
Whiteman.
We all have good teeth.
And hair salons. A lot of
Hair salons.
There's two new ones, one on Empire and one on Creek Street. They're brand new.
There's two near the Four
This-
Points.
I don't know where all these dentists are coming from.
They're simply relocating from another office so that they can have their own place and they're paid to install it. We've talked to them about it.
A lot of
Yeah,
people will have rented other
there's some
spots.
land I
and-
can build on and I can not
No,
pay
no,
lease
but-
anymore.
Yeah.
That's what they do.
A lot of the offices were built back in the 60s and 70s on second floors of office space, and now people
Aging.
don't want to climb those stairs or have to take an elevator to go to the dentist, especially if you've been Novocaine for 2 hours.
Or they
And they're
can't
looking
climb
for
it.
a first floor, they're all looking for first floor office space, basically, is what's happening. You still have corporate development where it doesn't matter, they're 3, 4 floors, they don't care, but these smaller operations all want. We're seeing a lot of the houses now along Penfield Road, over by Harris Whalen Park, which is zoned for business, non-retail. We have a young dentist going in over there now, they're building a new building, so. What else?
Jim, why don't we, Jim and Andy, so we have this from the previous group that got together and
Yes.
had the recommendations. What role does this serve for this group? So, you know, they made recommendations, they had the retirement community, they had sports fields, they had, what's the?
It
what is
was
this
a
for, though?
group that was really looking for alternatives to give to the town board as a recommendation. Because at that point in time, we were looking at the property. There was a moratorium for any future development on the site until we could come up with some type of recommendation to the town board as to what it might be or could be. You know, a couple people, you know, Bob, the staff were involved in that. I think it was really, should it be developed? Should it not be developed? If it's developed, what are the options? You know, people didn't want to see 250-plus houses on the site, regardless of who built them. I think it was just a function of not seeing that kind of development. There was a concern that the infrastructure and the road systems in that neighborhood probably were having to be heavily taxed in terms of that kind of development. There were other proposals such as senior housing or senior living facilities where it might be a continuum of care, that kind of thing. And the board was open about it. They said, look, you're the committee, you make the recommendation. You know, they stayed away from it, and recommendations came back that the property should be utilized for, you know, some type of recreation facility or some type of open space area. There might be some options for the second option.
That was the overriding.
Yeah,
there
and
was a-
then the second option was if that didn't happen, you know, possibly to look for senior where you had low impact to AM, PM peak traffic issues. You had no impact to the school district because you weren't generating more children to the district. There was a thought process that went through it. It took several months. But for your sake, it was really more of just an historical perspective as to what was going on early in the process when we knew that this property was going to become available for sale.
Something
Well,
to
that was
look.
the main recommendation was that the town purchase it.
And that's exactly,
That's
it.
right.
That's what I was
That's
gonna
right.
say, Jeff, is that, you know, the town board
To
needed
control it.
a document of justification to
Gotcha.
go forward and buy the property.
Okay.
I mean,
So it wasn't more of a, they were saying buy it, here's some options for this property if you
Right.
do buy it, not.
This was
The
pre-purchase.
primary option
Yeah, they
was,
didn't do, okay, so they didn't do any of the legwork or anything like that as far as figuring out what to do with it. It was, hey, if we buy this, these are some things we can do, So it would be
Or if we don't buy
advantageous to the
it,
community.
or if we don't buy it,
Right.
other
What should
other
occur
uses
if we
that
don't buy it?
manage-
Which
might
was,
be good
which was the
there.
There
third
was-
recommendation.
There was an
right?
idea to
Yeah.
rezone it without purchasing it, but
Right.
that got into,
Well, that wasn't in the report.
Yeah.
Well,
That
it's
was just,
also-
that was conversation.
It's also important to note,
a can of worms.
thankfully Dolomite worked with the town, but the town assesses the value, we basically have an appraisal of what the value of the property is, that's all the town can pay. So if developer ABC came in and said, I'll pay $1,000 more, $10,000 more, and Dolomite said, yeah, I'll just take the highest bidder, even if the vote went through and 80% of the people said buy it, and Dolomite said, we're just gonna sell it to the highest bidder, we can only pay $1, if they bid $2, then we're out. So that was the other part of that went into that discussion is, okay, if we can't buy it, Dolomite just goes, whoever gives us the most money, here we go. Even if 80% of the community voted for it, we still could
So what do
have
you
lost
figure
it.
that the town,
What's the fallback and what were the other options?
the
And that's
town
what-
got it for $500,000 to $750,000 less than what they could have sold it to a developer for.
So that's why I say, fortunately Dolomite worked with the town and said,
took
yes,
a hit to
we
make
did
a
an
donation.
appraisal, came up at $3.6 million. They said, yes, we'll accept that. They can say, we think it's worth $4 million, and I'm sure they probably could have found a developer who said, sure, I'll give you $4 million for it, and then.
They had a developer
they
that
had-
had a
So-
check ready to go.
They had a couple.
So
actually.
thankfully, they worked with us on it, because otherwise they could have sold it, and there's nothing, we can't get into a bidding war, we can only bid, what the value of the property is.
Jeff, it was justification for the town to go ahead and buy the property from an independent group of residents of the town of Penfield.
Okay.
That's what it provided. And when we thought it was important for this committee to just review that, to just have some background behind it, but, that document moving forward is just a baseline.
Right.
This committee will have its own document.
We were holding our breath for the referendum, the vote to come in, because there was a lot of pressure to go the other way on that vote,
So one
So
thing to
we
look
couldn't have
at,
been more pleased than.
one thing you can take away from that report, like Andy said, it's a baseline, but you can review what was said in option one, which is obviously the path we took.
Mhm.
And there's a lot that goes into option one, what kind of doors it opens, what kind of opportunities there are. So that is kind of your baseline to start out, what might help form your ultimate recommendations. So it is something to take a look at.
And if I can jump in for a second, Mark, you were talking about community needs. To be perfectly honest with everybody, I've been approached over the last 2 years since this Shadow Pines issue has popped up from youth sports or associations interested in more athletic fields for youth, and whether it's soccer, lacrosse, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm sure there's going to be some voice out there that will be talking about that too. And so that's all part of the conversation that we'll be having moving forward.
And I think, I don't know how many of you have attended public information meetings. You're not going to be obligated to sit there and answer questions or anything of that nature. The public information meeting is to draw information from the public, let them provide their input to you. We're just basically writing it down and tracking it, and then providing you with the ability to start looking at their recommendations to determine what's viable, what's not viable, what might be short-term, what might be long-term. A lot of them, a lot of the recommendations will come in, they might be very cost-effective early on. A lot of them might cost millions, depending on the situation. And certainly, we don't have millions at this point in time to do that. So you're gonna have to start weighing out, what's important and what may not be as important for the long-term goals of the project.
Is tonight a good night to try and grab a few possible dates for that, given the upfront communications?
Yeah, I think if
requirements?
we've identified the
the
site
walks,
tour,
yeah.
we should probably start thinking about what's viable for you for another open night.
Plus, we have to advertise for us. You're already talking
The
either end of this
legal
month or you're talking early November.
Well, ideally, if you're going to be on Tuesday nights, it might be good to have it on a Tuesday night that it would be normally scheduled for, so we're not eating up one of your other evenings. I know you've got families and everything you got to take care of. So if we could start looking into a Tuesday night, if that's good for everybody.
Can I ask a process question?
Sure.
The public hearings that I have been to usually involve the town board sort of being at the helm and receiving questions and thoughts, I guess, from the audience. How will a public hearing that involve?
Well, it's not really a
Is it a
public
public hearing or
hearing.
public information?
No, it's a public information.
Okay.
You're gonna provide, you're gonna get information back from the general public. There's no hearing per se.
Right.
There will probably be a hearing later on when the rec master plan's completed and, you know, other things are occurring. Your document will really be a recommendation to the town board. But you will have a public information meeting. I suspect the staff will probably, and maybe Andy is the liaison to the town board in this group here, we would probably sit up there just to coordinate it, to get people to come up and give their input. But in terms of requiring you to be up there, no, you should be in the audience. Secondly, you're not obligated to answer any questions at that point in time. We're there just to listen to what they're saying and collecting and gathering data, basically.
Yeah, I think it would be appropriate for the town to give some 5-minute presentation of what is going on, you know, with this committee and what has transpired. And then, as Jim said, this committee is there to listen. And if there's some questions, I guess we got to figure out the appropriate way of handling that, because I think that's fair. But certainly don't expect the committee to be answering questions. It's not a public hearing. It's not a debate. It's no cross-examining.
Really early in the process to be answering any questions.
Yeah, you're there just to
You're
listen and
You're
pick
just
up
there to
data.
hear what people are saying and what their thoughts are and what interests they have, whether it's, you know, a racetrack or, you know, a rock concert stadium.
If they have technical questions
Who knows?
during their process of asking, you know, providing you
Yeah.
information, I think the staff would probably be more appropriate, because you're not gonna have answers about
We'd have
sanitary
maps
sewer issues or.
and resources.
Yeah,
and we would
yeah. We- And we don't wanna
publicize
put you in that light
in
either. I
advance.
mean, you're here providing service to the community. You don't have to be out there, you know, getting beaten up or anything until, you know, come up with a final product.
And then you
Yeah, then you-
And they don't like the outcome.
So,
So, yeah, let's jump in.
What about are we in November or the 30th?
the
30th will be our meeting
30th.
after the next one.
October would be, yeah.
30th.
Is everybody okay with that? It's the night before Halloween. If you have kids, you may not.
Maybe.
May not want to do
Before
that.
Halloween, it's not Halloween.
People are shopping last minute for
Yeah.
Is there some value in having us meet in between the walkthroughs and the public hearings
Yeah,
that
what's
we
the
can all
soonest
discuss
early?
what we saw
Or the
kind of before we go?
That'd be a good idea.
This week, so if
You might want to
publish
just,
next
yeah,
week.
kind of discuss among yourselves some of the ideas and
So
thoughts
you
that
could
you
meet on
had
the
coming out of
30th
that walk.
if the group wants to compare notes, since we're walking in 2 separate groups.
And then the 13th for the
the
public input
13th
or
then
something.
for the public meeting.
November 13th?
November 13th.
People are still around. They haven't left for Thanksgiving.
Right.
I don't think.
I think we have a meeting the next
Thanksgiving.
No.
No, 6.
You're here a lot.
It's first Tuesday.
We could target that for the 13th and
Is the, how's the
And
13th?
as Eric
looking?
stated, does anybody want to get together after your site tour and discuss what you've seen and what you might want to,
Well, we'll have an opportunity on the 30th of
Yeah.
October.
do you want to meet on the 30th of October though? That's the
Oh.
question.
Oh, I think it's
it'll take up
okay.
less time than a public information meeting, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So we'll try,
I'm fine
maybe we'll
with
get you
that.
out early that night, maybe you just spend an hour or something.
Yeah.
if
Be a
you wanna
single
do that.
Break for an hour.
agenda.
It's just to go over what you know, if you had observations, it's a good point. I mean, you brought it up.
Bring candy.
You have observations you want to share with
Chocolate.
each other?
I think it's good to keep a schedule going, because ideas pop up, issues pop up. It's just, I think it's good for everybody to
Yeah.
keep us moving forward, not have a big lag.
I think that though, as we get to the holiday season, we're gonna have to give you a little bit of a lag,
Yeah.
because you're gonna wanna have some time with your families, and we're not gonna drag you out
I'll try
every
to
5
keep
minutes.
those to like one meeting a month.
And we need that information from the parks, or from the rec master plan committee.
All right, so if it's an agreement, then we will have a meeting here on the 30th of October. And that can be as long as we want it to be. And then the town will start planning for a public information meeting on the 13th of November. So we can get out the proper notices that we can do to try to, let people know what's going on.
And we'll try for that third site tour if you want.
Right.
We'll try and get that. For those that go for the first two, whoever's remaining, we'll try and build that in for you somehow, some way, and get that done.
I can walk around the property, I just can't get in the buildings, so.
We'll get you in the buildings.
Yeah, we individually are not supposed to be on the south side still.
No, you can go with town staff though, obviously, but we'll take care of that. But really, people should not be on that south, at that back 9 property at this point in time.
What times are public hearings best scheduled for?
7 o'clock.
Hearing.
We always do everything at 7
Yeah.
o'clock.
The public meetings, yeah.
Thank you.
And it's gonna be on our Tuesday night, not the town board's Wednesday.
Right,
Correct.
right. Yeah, we'll
Correct.
try to keep everything separate.
In terms of conduct of the meeting, I imagine the public will, even though the meeting is to get the public input,
There it is.
they're gonna know what we're thinking preliminarily in there. So it seems to me we should probably, be prepared to make a little initial address to the public, to tell them where we are, where we're going, and give them confidence that our minds are open. And then the question becomes, who should deliver that statement? Should it be the staff, or should it be somebody from this group? I don't know, I'm just suggesting it's something.
Does anybody from the group want to do that? Do you feel comfortable enough to want to just give a quick presentation as to who you all are and why you're doing this?
Yeah, well, I don't want to do it myself, but,
That's okay. I mean, it's a good point. You're not obligated to do it. I mean, certainly the staff and Andy will give a quick presentation as to what we're doing there that night. But if anybody
The Moritorium
wants
committee,
to...
we had a similar meeting, but I think you handled it, didn't you, Andy?
You also had a committee member get up and speak before the public
You
hearing.
did?
And Zeke got up and spoke.
Correct. Yes, you're right. Forgot about that.
That was a group decision, and she kind of,
Yeah,
I don't want to say volunteered.
Involuntarily volunteered.
Yeah.
Everybody step back.
She was the last one to back out of that
Susan,
one.
you're on.
But you're not obligated to do that. If you don't feel comfortable, you're not obligated.
I would if that was, but I don't want to.
That's something
If
we
somebody
can
else
talk
that wants to
about.
do it, I would be happy to
As we move
do
closer
that
to
in
it, we'll
concert
talk
with some.
about
I'll arm wrestle anybody and I will let you win if you want.
That's a possible topic of discussion for the 30th, though. At least
fine.
plenty of time to
Don't need to
prepare
make
any
this
notes or things that you may want to communicate as a committee.
Okay.
But again, I mean, the real goal of that is to hear what the residents have to say.
Right.
Anything else?
Okay, so on October 16th, there's no meeting here, it's replaced by
That's
the...
right. 4 o'clock.
I'll communicate all of this in an email so everyone has something to look
And then on
at.
the 20th, we'll meet at 9 o'clock, same place, same, same location as the 16th. And then we'll meet again on the 30th here.
And the proposed agenda for the 30th is to preview with
Recap.
the.
Yeah, we'll put everything together for you.
Kind of talk about the walk and then prepare for the public information meeting. And then anything else that comes up between now and then.
Thanks.
How is the town going to notify the public besides the general, like, social media, town website? Is there going to be like a mailer that's going to go out
We're
so
gonna-
that we get the best possible?
Well, we're not
representation?
going to mail 14,000 postcards. We'll do what we normally do for any public hearing or any public informational meeting. We will get it in the paper. We have to do that anyway. Put it in the paper, be on our website. I'm sure we can do something.
We'll have several releases. It'll be in Tony's column, it'll be in a press release.
Right.
Is this area big enough for that? I mean, if we had that many people vote
It
to
is.
buy it, we can handle that many people?
I think we'll be fine.
Yeah,
You know.
we had a meeting here on the 22nd of June back in 2016, I think.
Our first
That was the
public
first one where
hearing.
people started coming out saying you should buy the property.
Yeah.
And we did, it was full, but it wasn't overtaxing the building or the room, so I think it'll be okay.
We bring twice as many chairs in, and we accommodate for that.
That's true, you can move this and,
We take
Yeah.
all this out and put chairs in.
got it.
It works.
And there'll be a process for people to submit their ideas in writing as well, and some
Prior
people will
to.
be happy to do that, not.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
isn't your only
Wow.
avenue is to get up and speak. You can send an email, a letter, whatever.
And would we have
Generally
it
do, if we have
live,
public
telecast live,
information.
like we did?
Public information meetings are usually, it depends. Sometimes we can record it and then
They're not required
rebroadcast
to
it.
be broadcast
No.
live, but it's possible.
I think it'd be a good idea, then people could watch and email or call, like,
But that will cut down on attendance, which isn't bad. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that if people know they can watch it from their home.
Brian and Dave are listening now, we can.
I remember watching some of the Shadow Pines. I couldn't make it down here in
Yeah.
person. I watched it from home live. But it could help people who can't make it too. I mean, if we reach more
Well, and
people.
it's not like if you don't make it that night, you're out. I mean,
Right,
we will be
yeah.
accepting comments from the public for,
Comments.
through the process.
Now, you mentioned a lot of comments already came in. Is there any way to get access to those?
You
prior
will,
to our walks?
yes.
Yeah, you will, yeah. Can we coordinate that as far as all the emails and letters that have come in to
I think
date?
Anna's got them
Okay.
all compiled, but we can send that out ahead of the walk, so
Yeah.
as you're walking around, and I know we've had, comments
So
about
good
horseback
idea.
riding, and somebody else, recommended doing soapbox derby down the hill, so as you're standing on the top of the hill, you can
Right.
visualize, is that a good spot for it, does that make sense, but, I mean, I think it's a good comment, as you're walking around.
You should
Can
have that.
visualize some of these
It's a good
things being
idea.
out there and how
I
they
like
would
that.
tie in, and
All right, so the town will get something out to the committee members before the walk, before the first walk. Okay, great.
Just- I just had one thing, I just wanted to kind of bring this full circle here. I got the sense at the beginning of the meeting that the idea of the alienation was kind of viewed as a bit of a risk. But reading through the advisory committee's recommendations here, it came through pretty strongly that it seemed like really the desire was to preserve this as like recreation, open space. One of the lines in here is designation of the property as recreation and sanctuary. Wouldn't the alienation process help to kind of protect it for that?
Not necessarily,
No.
because if you, as I said earlier, if you build a building that is recreation, they may not approve that building, depending on the situation. So-
recreation means different things to different people.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
Get
mean,
control over it to
recreation
the
is,
state.
if you declare it a
Yeah.
straight out parkland, it's just a 212 acre butterfly garden. You can,
You're giving up options.
you can still have it utilized as park space with hiking trails and other stuff, keeping it under general municipal use, but allowing the shelters to go in or future uses of, is that where the community center goes? Is that where the future ice skating rink goes? You have options to put that stuff out there. If you just say it's flat out parkland, then you got what you got, and
You kind of have
Close
to
the doors,
expand
so.
upon what
Well,
we're in
if
there.
you can build a shed for storage of sleds in the wintertime to get slide on, you might not be able to get that done as easily as you would think. So it does give you the ability, it's good for you as a group. It gives you the ability to have a wide array of options to look at. You might not like all the options, you might not recommend those options, but it gives you the ability to have them and dismiss the ones you don't think are appropriate.
Like Andy said, that option one that you see in the moratorium committee's report, it's a baseline, but it's also something to expand upon.
Okay.
Well said.
Anything else? Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.